Guns are tools. Guns have different purposes. These are two fairly obvious statements. If you want to shoot out to 600 yards, well, there's a gun for that. If you want to run around and LARP on a flat range, there's guns for that as well. If you want to concealed carry a handgun to protect yourself and others, there are plenty of guns for that. In today's video, we want to demonstrate the differences between two guns that we consider great candidates for concealed carry. Now, these guns don't just have to be limited to concealed carry. They are both excellent guns. As you probably guessed by the title, that is the Sig Macro and the MR920 from Shadow Systems. Let's get into the video.
Those are in.
There are a handful of attributes that make a pistol good. Some of these include weight, frame, both size and grip angle, sights, the feel of the grip, trigger, reliability, and accuracy. So we want to break down the differences between the Sig and the Shadow Systems. Now you'll also see something very interesting today. We tried to do the classic Trex Arms course of fire, which was 50 round pistol course of fire. And well, we made a little bit of a oopsie. You see, our targets, our full-size USPCA targets, didn't come in by the time we were shooting this video, and we didn't want to wait another month to display these to you guys, so we went ahead and used what we had. Some paper plates and some minis. So, I'll explain this later whenever we actually take a look at the actual shooting and scoring, but we changed the scoring a little bit to try and match up with the fact that we were shooting only A zones, and anything outside of the A zone would be considered a miss, and therefore minus 10 points. Technically, the Sig Macro is a heavier gun than the Shadow Systems. However, in our case, that's not entirely true. First of all, the base Sig and a base Shadow Systems MR920 both weigh around 21 ounces. The Shadow System comes in at 20.5 ounces, whereas the Sig Macro comes in at 21.5 ounces. So it's about an ounce difference. Now, we also have equipped the Shadow Systems a little bit more than we have equipped the Sig Macro, with the Sig Macro only having the Streamlight TLR7A light on the front of the gun, which is about another added ounce. The weight difference between the two base models has been made up by the attachments that we would put onto the Shadow System. Weight is pretty important for concealed carry guns because you're going to be carrying the gun with you all day. The lighter the gun, the more comfortable it's going to be for you. The frame is another interesting difference between these two guns. Obviously, Sig has a very distinct frame and grip angle, whereas Glock has something very different. Now, the Shadow Systems is not a Glock, but it is modeled after a Glock. So it uses Glock mags, and therefore uses the same Glock grip angle that a lot of us are used to. But that's not to say that there's any real difference between the shooting of either of these guns. Mainly because, well, it's just personal preference and something that you can get used to. If you're a good shooter, you're going to be a good shooter with a Sig and with a Glock. That's pretty much it.
2, 3. Oh, that's on the line.
Both guns are cut for optics straight out of the box. That's awesome because red dot sights on pistols are becoming the way of the future. Now, we don't have a red dot on the Macro, but we do have one on the Shadow System, so take that for what it is. The optics on both guns are pretty awesome. The Shadow Systems does have upgraded iron sights that are co-witnessed with the red dot, so you can still use it just in case the red dot goes down. The Sig doesn't have that. We don't have a red dot on it, so we just have the standard Sig iron sights, which are actually really good.
No. I don't know.
Now, whenever I talk about grip, I'm not talking about the grip angle of the gun. I'm talking about the actual physical grip on the gun. How does it differ between Sig and the Shadow Systems? Well, it's pretty similar. Sig has a very nice feeling, aggressive, almost like skateboard-like grip tape that's wrapped around the entirety of the handle, and the same with the Shadow Systems, of course. They both have a very similar consistency in that they are very fine and very grippy. The only difference I've seen so far with my MR920 is that the places where my hands will rest the most are going to have worn down grip. I've had this gun in particular for only about 6 months, and you might be able to see, it might be kind of hard to see, but there is right here where my palm is up against the grip, it is starting to wear down on the grip a little bit and flatten it out, but even rubbing my finger across it, it still feels extremely grippy. The only other difference in terms of grip between the macro and the shadow systems is up here on the front. We've talked about this before in our other holster video, but the shadow systems has 2 little cutouts on each side, which are just textured for your pleasure. Support hand point for your thumb. Now, the trigger in both of these guns are both good, but they're both different. Glock has always notoriously had sort of meh triggers, especially compared to Sig for a lot of people. But in my opinion, these triggers feel equally good, but different. They don't feel like one is better than the other. Now, the MR920 does have an upgraded trigger pack in it, which gives you a nice crisp 4-pound trigger pull, which I personally quite enjoy. It's still the standard Glock style trigger though, where obviously it's a striker-fired gun, so there's a wall and then a break. But it's pretty clean on the MR920, much cleaner than a basic standard stock Glock would be. The Sig trigger is a stock Sig trigger, but it feels remarkably good. Now, the trigger is still going to be the same sort of feel as a normal striker-fired gun, but Sig triggers have always felt more spongy to me. But that's just me. I tend to prefer Glock triggers over Sig triggers, but that's just me. I don't really see a huge difference in the triggers on these particular guns. I think they're both great. Reliability. Reliability is a big thing, especially for a concealed carry handgun, because you want to be assured that when you pull that gun out and pull the trigger in a life or death scenario, that gun is going to go off. And I can say I've had an excellent time with my Sig and with the macro, as well as with the MR920. I've had pretty much no hiccups. Now, I will concede that the MR920 ships standard with 2 Glock PMags. I have had issues with Glock PMags. Pretty much just failure to feeds pretty consistently with the Glock PMags. Now, it doesn't always happen, but I will just admit that the MR920 has reliability issues whenever you use the stock Glock PMags that it comes with. Now, I did substitute these PMags out and use standard Glock magazines, as well as, I know, the dreaded ETS magazines, and I've had no stoppages or issues with those whatsoever. I don't have a ton of rounds through the MR920 because it is still fairly new to me, but Connor has had tons of rounds through the MR920. He's had one for probably close to 2 years now, whereas mine's only been with me for about 6 months. With that being said, I think both guns are equally reliable. Sig has had some issues in the past in terms of the safety of their guns, but the macro seems to be actually very well put together, and we've had no issues or stoppages with it thus far.
I feel like one of these in here.
Accuracy. Accuracy is a huge thing. Now, obviously, this isn't going to be a completely unbiased comparison between the accuracy of the Sig versus the accuracy of the MR920. That should go without saying. Obviously, the MR920 is a little bit more kitted out. It's a little bit bigger of a gun. They're different guns. I can say that the accuracy out of both guns is completely acceptable. And that is why we ran our Trex Arms course of fire, because we didn't want to just sit from a bench and cold bore each and every shot to get the utmost accuracy and then compare those two. So we decided to do the Trex Arms 50-round pistol course of fire, and that essentially gave us the numbers that we would like to show you guys. So I have our papers right here. This is the 50-round course of fire. It's a little marred up, but hey, it's fine, it works. With that being said, I can say that Connor, with the macro out of concealment, scored a hit factor of 3.29 versus me on the MR920 with a hit factor of 2.89. Now, This isn't entirely accurate. As you're probably seeing, there were some flukes and some flops with our testing, and we would love to get back out and test it again sometime, but probably not for a while. As of now, we did sort of grade ourselves a lot harsher than we would have if we were running the actual course of fire with full-size USPCA targets. Like I said, we were only shooting A zones. In the case of an A zone is 5 points, C zone is 3 points, D zone is 0 points, and a miss or a mic is minus 10 points. So if we were ending up on the actual A zone target, we were counting that as a miss. And that really caused, I think, some issues with our scoring and made our scoring lower than what it would have been. Because number one, we had to go much slower so that we could get more accuracy on the smaller targets. And number two, some of our shots could have been C zones and gave us some points. Some of them could have been D zones and just given us 0 points instead of minusing 10. So take that with a grain of salt as well. If you want to go off of just straight the hit factor, obviously Connor didn't run through this with an MR920 and I didn't run through this with a macro. I have shot the macro plenty, but I didn't run through this particular course of fire, mainly because, hey, I didn't have a macro, so I didn't have a holster, and I felt like not having a holster would really affect the holstered part of these courses of fire. So what should you guys gain from this? Well, while I do want to say that one is better than the other, I don't necessarily know that we can make that conclusion. It's personal preference. Both guns are excellent. Both guns did well and felt well while running the course of fire. Both guns are very similarly priced. Both guns are similarly weighted. Both guns have similar abilities to be set up. So, at the end of the day, pick one that you like. Here at Purposeful Armament, we just want to give you guys the information and a breakdown so that you can pick what you want to do. As always, thank you guys for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, gained something out of this. At the very least, hopefully it was entertaining, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you.
One thing I really like about this light is after shooting this today, you're going to see the front of this light is going to be covered in carbon buildup.